exciting stuff with you guys today. So before we jump in and get started, I just want to encourage everyone to close out your other browser windows, put your cell phones away or on silent. Sam has such an incredible depth of experience and knowledge, and I would hate for you to miss something important because we're distracted on our phones. Like I said, VBC is a global company. We've done a ton of projects. You can see the blue pins are where our factory locations are. So we serve the West Coast, the East Coast, 3 factories in Poland, including a furniture fit out factory, in addition to our modular factory. So we can also do FF&E for projects and have done for hundreds of projects. Here are some of the buildings that VBC has done and completed. These are all modular buildings. And so sometimes modular gets a bad rap, or people think that modular isn't high quality. You step into these buildings and these are towering, large, impressive, beautiful buildings. And so just wanted to show off some of the diverse locations in which we've been able to build. Sam Bailey is our host today. Sam, thank you so much for giving up some of your busy schedule to be with us all today. Sam has a really fascinating history. He's been in this business, in the modular and industrialized construction business, for over 27 years. And one of the things that I think is really exciting about Sam's experience that you guys will benefit from today is that he's really touched every aspect of this business. So he works out of our Berwick, Pennsylvania factory, where he started at that factory in 1996. And he was on the floor actually building some of the modules. And so he has touched or been involved with the production, installation, or delivery of over 3,000 modules in his career. So he brings a huge depth of experience to our webinar today. So Sam, thanks so much for sharing, and take you guys through a quick webinar, and then I'll hand it over to Sam. So he's going to take us through all the basic steps of project feasibility today. We're going to go through real unit and floor plan reviews. We're going to talk about a product versus project approach and kind of the pros and cons of that, how geography and location impact modular feasibility, and ultimately go through some Q&A. So without further ado, Sam, thank you so much, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
Pleasure. Appreciate that. Great to see everybody here. Thank you for attending. Like Caitlin said, I'm super excited to kind of talk about this. And all of my years here, I'm in a kind of a unique role where I can now teach and continue to learn every day, but also teach what I've gained over the years. So hopefully you'll take that away from this presentation. So thank you for everybody. I'd like to start this with just a quick sort of context here. So what does feasibility mean to VBC? Why do we provide this service, and when? And we'll build on this a bit here from each slide following this. So think of it as kind of a sliding scale. It's not as simple as a yes, no. We really have to evaluate all the factors that impact feasibility. We do this up front from sort of initial inception or initial contact with our clients and our projects. It isn't as simple as looking at a floor plan and saying, hey, if you move this over here and you align this up, and if it's in the right geographic area, then yes, it should make sense for modular. You can do that, but you don't get the full benefit of evaluating all the individual steps. And some of those steps that I've learned over the years that are super important, that ultimately have, each of them sort of have a plus minus to that, so they can be positive or negative to this, and ultimately equal the total balance. Some of the ones that are important are the red lines. Did they accept our red lines? Is a yes, no. Did they like our rough order of magnitude price? Did the budget make sense to them? A big one, the initial logistics. Do we have that figured out yet? Or do we still need to work on some things? Or are there still some issues that are open? The design efficiency, the unit efficiency, the repeatability of the overall floor plan is super important. You know, is it a positive one, or does it have some challenges? Does it have any productization? We'll build on that here a little bit in this presentation as well. VBC offers a VMX spec, or a variety of products within our product, if you will. Specification plays a big role in feasibility. If it's our specs, we know these items, we know what they are, we know where they are, we know how to use them. Or is it custom materials? That's all part of the feasibility. Do we have a well-defined scope of work? It's a major factor in a project. We want to do that early. And then schedule. Schedule maybe being another major one. Do we know what the schedule is? Is it well-defined? Does it seem feasible? Do we have a good plan to match that schedule? So all of those things equal a total balance. And to me, that's how feasibility really should be measured for each project. And it ultimately tells us how we need to respond to each one.
So now Sam's going to take us through good floor plans, and all of the examples that we've pulled for this presentation are all real projects that have come through our front door. So you guys are going to get to see kind of a behind the scenes on all of this. So Sam, you want to take us through what makes a good floor plan?
Sure, happy to. So the example on the screen, just to sort of look at it, it's a 2-bedroom layout, right? It's drawn modular. It's broken up into 4 modules. At first glance, is it feasible? Yes. Think of the items I just mentioned earlier, the efficiency and all the items that we look at, all the factors that we look at that determines overall feasibility. First glance, it's modular friendly, it's drawn modular, it's feasible, right? But it's not just that, right? It's not just the yes, no, it's the sum of all those individual pieces. So in this example, it starts with the living units. The projects, if a project has all unique floor plans and unit plans, it generally equals a low efficiency, which means a slower throughput through manufacturing, which results in a higher cost or a higher cost per living unit. It's not optimized. This particular one is 4 bedrooms wide instead of typical a 3-bedroom wide unit like we would see with a 2-bed. It's got 4 different module types. It's 4 different widths. This one is from a small project example. So at first glance, from first feasibility, is it drawn modular? Does it seem feasible? Yes. But when you really look at all the details and all those factors that we talked about, it sort of lends to how, it answers that how feasible is it? Is it one that you want to put in that pipeline? If it were in a larger project, say I had 100 of these, that feasibility score gets increased, right? It gets better. So this is a low efficiency example for us. A medium efficiency example like this one. So some of the challenges here. It still has a high number of module types. You can see that from the color coding here. It's got a bit of an irregular footprint. Doesn't lend itself to a lot of uniformity dimensionally. It's a more complex site. Has a more complex site scope. See all the areas with the arrows pointing to them? Those are all areas that aren't defined or aren't able to be built as part of the module. It's not ideal, right? It's not optimized. It's not efficient. Some of the positives, it does have some repeatability to it. You can see that again in the colors. It is a larger project, so you've got that economy of scale working for you versus the first example that I showed you. Your throughput will increase over time. It won't get to where you want it to get to, but it will increase. So it's a better example. So we rank this one as a medium efficiency.
And on this example, this is a cross section of one of many floors of this particular building.
Right. Yeah. Great point. So this is a high efficiency one for us. And the reasons why, again, back to those factors, it's not the simple yes, no. This one has 41 module types, plus the roof modules. When we divide that by the total number of living units, we get a kind of an efficiency score. This one scores pretty high. The way and the reason it scores high is it's got high repeatability. You can see that there's not a lot of variables here. All the residential spaces are within the modules. I don't have a lot of site-built space like we had in that medium example. It's a larger project. To Caitlin's point, this is only 1 floor of it, but overall, in total, it is a larger project, so you have an economy of scale. It's got a relatively simple building shape. It's not, kind of a complex trapezoid sort of shape. It lends itself to regular geometry. And it's consistent in dimensions, as you can tell. If you can see the dimensions, they're generally all boxes are 12'7", except for some of those outside corners. So it's very repeatable and very efficient.
And why does the width matter? Why does the consistency of width of the boxes matter, Sam?
Well, yeah, every time we change the width, we change it to a new unit type, right? A new module type. So we're trying to keep that number down. The more consistent we can keep that, the better. And that lends itself to some of the productization approach and some of those units that we already have made up. We try to keep them all at a same sort of nominal dimension.
Awesome.
So a good example, like a sort of a simple example from that one, what lends it to being an efficient one is those unit types that I mentioned in the very beginning. It starts with those unit types. This particular example, simple studio unit, was very friendly to begin with. So it was started in the right direction from the very beginning. We were able to kind of deliver all of the same components that the AOR's version has on the left into our sort of modularized version on the right, and made some small tweaks, but we're largely unaffected. There wasn't a lot of change required to it. So this one ranks high on the efficiency scale.
Great. And now let's talk a little bit about a product versus project approach. And so I think this is like the push and pull that's can be challenging with people that haven't gone modular before with a project, is that you have this desire to want to customize everything and kind of have your own unique take on it. But you lose, kind of to Sam's point, you lose some of that efficiency and you lose that factory throughput. And when he says efficiency, what he really means is time and money. So you can kind of understand that. So there's kind of this spectrum to all of this. You want to take us through that, Sam?
Yeah, sorry, it seems like I have a little delay here. Yeah, to Caitlin's point, so sort of three paths here, simply. Bespoke project, traditional one-off, think custom, small volume, probably small project, maybe one a year. Generally is custom floor plans, not overly efficient. Just looking for a solution to get something built, not trying to scale that solution. This generally has a bit more scope in the field, a bit more site work as well. So again, that's just not overly efficient. Your middle version, think branded hotels, think Marriott's as an example, right? They've got a pre-approved layout. They submit that. Here's what they're looking to build. It's their version, if you will. And then the third version, this is the true sort of product approach. Simply, I would say, I would explain this as you're all in. You've put all your chips in here. You see the value in the VBC pre-engineered units. You understand the product approach. You understand how it benefits you and how it benefits your projects. You may be a large developer looking to do thousands of units across the country and trying to find a better solution that's more scalable to your needs. VBC's product platform is that solution. It is for you.
And so how that works is, I can share this quick video here, is that we've actually designed a building system where we have a library of units that range from studios up to 3 bedrooms, and that there is design flexibility built into this. So units can be, the widths are fixed, but units can be stretched in 6-inch increments all the way up to 36 feet. And all of it is already pre-coordinated. There's 0 clashes, and the engineering and MVP is about 80% completed in these units. So again, it's all about kind of creating these efficiencies, creating these manufacturing optimizations so that you can get faster throughput, higher efficiency, which again, when we hear the word efficiency, we think time and money. So I'll walk you guys through quickly some, and if for anyone who's interested in learning more about kind of these standard units and how they can be customized, feel free to just put a little note in the chat, and we're happy to send some additional information as well. But these are studios. We've got 1-bedroom floor plans, 2-bedroom floor plans, all the way up to 3-bedroom. And again, all of these can kind of be customized to meet your unit mix requirements and your site specifications.
So when you do that, right, why do that? The benefit is savings of cost and time. And to Caitlin's point, time is money. So think, back to that image and the video. Think of those pre-designed, fully modeled units ready to go. You drop them in your footprint. You maximize your efficiency. You essentially use them everywhere you possibly can. You maximize that overall throughput. Basically, what we've done is we've taken and dramatically shortened the time frame for design, shop drawings, and procurement, simply by utilizing the known information. So we're using our spec. We know what those materials are. We have them on hand. I don't have lead time issues. The shop drawing process is essentially done, is largely done. Your overall design process is dramatically reduced by using the product approach. So you've saved time on the front end. You've locked in a bunch of known information. And the result of that is we can now put this online and put it in our manufacturing slots faster, which means we can deliver them to the site sooner. And now we're compressing the overall construction schedule, and you get a time savings and a cost.
Absolutely. Okay, the next item we want to talk about is geography. And so, I think generally people think about the distance to a factory as impacting costs, but that's not a hard, fast rule.
In overall costs.
Uh-oh, I think hopefully, can you guys hear us okay? Are we having some bandwidth issues?
Caitlin, I can hear you fine. I think there might be a little delay, but I can hear you okay.
Okay. All right. We're gonna keep forging ahead here. Okay. So we're gonna talk about geography next and how that impacts. We had mentioned that VBC has 5 factories globally. 3 of those are our modular factories. We have one located in Tracy, California, one in Berwick, Pennsylvania, and then we have 3 factories in Poland. The modular one in Hanica, and that also includes a furniture factory as well. So we do FF&E for projects. We work with a lot of large hotel brands and do FF&E for them as well. And the reason why this is important is because obviously the modules originate from the factory, but they have to get to your job site, right, Sam?
That's right. So as a general rule of thumb, kind of an industry rule of thumb, graphically, we're showing that 6-hour radius from the Northeast location, or about a 500 or 600 mile driving radius. We use that because the cost to transport is a bit of a variable, meaning we don't have control of it. I'm sure everyone lives in the real world. We all know how gas prices and diesel prices tend to fluctuate. And when diesel is low, that radius might increase slightly, or projects that maybe didn't make sense before now can. Or inversely, when diesel is high, that radius could reduce, and projects that maybe were cost effective at one time maybe now not be. That cost to transport per module, like I said, is a bit of a variable and can influence the viability or feasibility of a project if it's outside of that radius. So there are some unique circumstances that we're going to talk about next that trump that, if you will, but that's sort of the general rule of thumb.
Great. So let's talk about those. When does distance not matter?
Yeah. So a couple unique things. Unique locations per the images here. Think tropical locations, really any island location. Anywhere where you've got to ship in kind of materials individually or over in a bulk ship anyway. Why not ship in an entire volume, right? If you've got to ship that small pieces in, you might as well ship in an entirely completed unit. Oftentimes, those unique locations have a labor issue as well. So again, we kind of try to solve that, right? We're shipping in a volume unit, a modular unit that's largely complete, solves the material problem and the labor problem all in one shot. There's also then can be some unique circumstances, and think any weather related sort of area. Iceland as an example, Colorado, Alaska, any of those sort of extreme weather type of locations, domestically and internationally, obviously. They've got limited construction windows. We're doing something prefabricated as a volumetric modular building can make sense because they often have a labor problem as well and have a limited building season and can have the need to ship materials in separately as well. So if you can get all 3 of those things to line up, you've got a good situation that radius doesn't apply to.
And these images that we've pulled in for this slide are not random. We are actually working on projects in Iceland and in the Caribbean islands right now. So that's a great example. Okay, let's explore some real site examples. And so this is where we're going to ask for some input from all of you. We're curious if you guys can now take some of this knowledge and spot whether modular makes sense for a project or not. And we're going to take you through 3 real site examples and then get your opinion at the end of it. So the first site we're going to take a look at is East Boston.
Yep. So a little background. So this is a 4 and 5 story residential building. It has a partial first floor with common area and some residential units. And it's located in a kind of a tight corner urban lot location in that East Boston area with a school directly behind it. So a lot going on, good sized building. I think this is a medium sized project in a very busy area.
Yep.
So the first thing we do in evaluating this, the feasibility of this, is we look at the delivery route. We've got to ship these things over the road like we talked about, and every state and country that we go through generally has a Department of Transportation requirement, a height, width, and length requirement. So first thing we want to do is determine how we're getting them there. So from the factory itself to the actual project site, we need to give that feedback back to all of our supporting teams and make sure that we are designing and building something that can make that route along that route. And then once we get into those limits, the city limits, and the job site area, then we start to look at that offsite storage requirement. Storage is a major consideration for feasibility of any project in these metro areas. And that image on the top right, the red circle sort of graphically represents the optimum storage location relative to the project site. So simply, the more modules you can store, the closer, the better off you are. And the image at the bottom is a graphic example of capacity. And the capacity of every storage area that you need can vary based on the size of the project and your geographic location. But this is part of that initial feasibility that we look at for each project.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions, we're going to take questions at the end, certainly, but one of the questions someone has, which I think is appropriate to handle now, would be, how do you ship modules overseas?
Yeah. We don't have an example of that actually in here, but there is, I think, Caitlin, you have links actually on the website, I think, of overseas shipping. Any of the international locations, anywhere that we've got to go over the water is, we ship on a traditional ship, barge type ship, or container type ship to get to those locations. There's a port to port coordination.
Oh, I think Sam might have broken up a little bit.
Shipping would include that coordination.
Okay, fantastic. And then Alexander, I see you're asking, why can't modules be shipped by rail in the United States? It is a law that you cannot ship housing via railroad. I do not know why, but that is the law. So, okay. So then let's look at Sam. Hopefully you're still with us.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can definitely hear you now. So yeah, let's move on to now kind of drilling even deeper from how do you get your modules from your staging site now to your actual project location?
Yeah. Apologies for the internet connection. So this is a sort of blown up view. So now that we've identified how we're going to get them to the site, we've said we've got a storage requirement and we've worked that out. Now we need to understand how to get them from that storage area to the actual project site. This is really where the devil's in the details. So in this case, we're physically mapping out the exact permitted route that we're going to take from the storage area to the project site, looking at every turn, every road obstruction, every height, width, length requirement, everything that we need to think about and consider to deliver those modules from the offsite storage area to the job site itself, and planning out the entire route so that it's confirmed up front and we don't have any issues later. In this example, it's great that the team did this, and there's a team effort from everybody involved to figure these things out. We had to actually build the modules in a way and cut them apart at the storage area to be able to deliver them to this site. So once we get to the site, now we start to look at the crane locations, the way that the modules are going to be fed to the cranes themselves, the assumed set direction, and the overall kind of laydown and logistics of the project site and how it meets all the requirements that we need. This information is critical to feedback upstream to the rest of our teams so that we can design and construct the building to comply and work with the requirements of the site that we planned out in the very beginning.
So what do you guys think? How does this East Boston site match up? Is modular feasible? Is it a good fit? What do you guys think? Let's see what the comments are. Someone said East Boston's not a great area for shipping. Delivery logistics could be a problem to keep this one on schedule. Someone's saying medium fit. So Sam, you want to reveal? Is this a real project?
It is. I'm happy to say it is a real project. It's active. It's underway, and we think we've solved it. So stay tuned. This is a real project. It's feasible, and we're moving forward.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, great. Next one. Okay, so now we're going to go on the other side of the country. We're going to look at a project that came through our front door in Oakland, California. This is close to where I live. Project specifics.
Sure. So interesting, the format that we're showing you is what we use, but the requirements for each geographic region that we serve are different. So I guess some of the questions earlier, internationally, they're different. East Coast, they're different. West Coast, they're different, and anything in between, frankly. Hence the reason why we do this in the first place, right, is to identify those challenges and come up with solutions. This one is a 6-story residential building. It's got a first floor common space, think a traditional podium, and it's in an urban site with multiple site access issues. When we look at that a little closer, again, similar to the other layout, we identify the delivery route from the West Coast facility to the job site. This one's much closer, so less issues and a lot closer. We can turn delivery timeframes around better, but we need to make sure it's permitted, right? And then when we zoom into the project site, we find this one's got some other different challenges that some of the other projects didn't. Example number one is there's an overpass that is directly in line with how we need to ship the modules to get into the project site, because this is literally the only road that's wide enough that we can get a permit for to deliver into. So we have to deal with this bridge. Fortunately, through the investigation of this report, we found that that bridge is higher than our module, so we should be fine, and we're able to clear that. Image number 2 shows some trees and existing road barriers and things that are in the route that we have to take next. It's good to identify these things early so that you're not surprised when the trucks come through there and start tearing branches out and ripping trees down. Generally, you don't make a lot of friends doing that, so we're looking to identify those things early and plan accordingly. And then number 3 was a good one. We found the turn actually making the turn into the actual project site was free of obstructions, no issues, no low stoplights, had plenty of clearances, those sorts of things. So overpass was good. Trees maybe a little challenging, but the final turn was good. And then when we get to the site itself, like I said earlier, this one has some challenges, and this is where it gets really interesting. If you can tell graphically here, you have a fairly large building with 3 existing structures on all 3 sides, only allowing access from one. That is not ideal for what we do. So we had to look at this one and get creative and think of possible solutions, or they could be deal breakers, right? Again, it's kind of the reason we do this and the reason we do it so early in the process. So image number 1, you can see has power lines directly on the street side of the project site. That is absolute worst case scenario. They're tall. We don't really want to pick over them. And they're right in the way. So that could be a deal breaker itself. Problem number 1. Number 2, it's a one-way street, and there was some on-street parking meters directly where we would need to set up the cranes, because again, we only have access from one side, from the front there. So that could be a problem. So we want to identify that and confirm that that we can either have them removed or covered, or work with the local police department to ensure it's not an issue. And then the third one is there was an existing building just in front of us that had an access. One of their main accesses and entranceways was, again, right where we need to set modules and cranes and kind of occupy that whole street. So identifying these things early and notifying the right people and kind of working through them, critical to the project's success. You cannot wait until you roll out there with a bunch of boxes only to find out there's a bunch of problems and you can't do.
Yep. And then on this particular project, the developer did decide that they wanted to pay to have the power line.
Multitude of issues.
Yep. And this particular project, the developer wanted to pay to have the power lines put underground. So that would solve one of those particular issues.
Yep. So the set side of it, quick, same idea, right? This is imagery showing where we propose we would possibly set up the cranes. Again, the power line thing was a major obstruction, but if we could work around that, and showing the assumed set direction, and then ultimately the way the boxes would feed into the cranes themselves, this would work to tell us how we would develop the assumed set direction, which again is what we would transmit back to the rest of our teams.
Okay, so what do you guys think? Is modular feasible? Would this be a good project for modular? What do you think? Curious to get, can you guys do Sam's job for him?
Please make it easy.
And Sam, while we're waiting for people to chime in there, someone is asking if within California, does VBC do third-party setting, or is that something that we take care of and handle in-house?
Do we do third-party setting? Meaning, do we set other people's projects? I assume is the question, right?
I think they're
We
asking if we set our own projects.
Okay. We do set our own projects. We also West Coast. We also do work with some partners, if you will, that do that as well. But East Coast, we set all our own work everywhere. West Coast, I think we're working out some options of what we think makes the most sense. Probably a mix of both. We do not set third party or other people's projects on the West Coast or East Coast for that matter.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Okay, and then this one, yes, modular is feasible, but it wasn't an ideal project for modular, and the client decided not to move forward with this project given kind of the complexity and the early issues that Sam's team uncovered in feasibility. So not a great opportunity for modular, even though it's an expensive place to build, even though it's close to our factory, even though it's a large project with a lot of repeatability. Ultimately, it just didn't quite make sense. Okay, so our final site, this one I'm really excited to share. This one's in downtown Philadelphia. Sam, you want to walk us through the details?
Sure. No, happy to. I want to start with this one by saying, again, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I want to stress it with this one in particular because it's critical. A project like this large, this complex, with this much scale, essentially this many things that can go wrong, absolutely requires an entire team to make successful. And we have that team here, and they did a fantastic job here, all aspects of it. So this one is a 4 and 5 story residential structure over top of 2 floors below grade parking and 2 levels commercial. The modular part, the 4 to 5 stories, is 410 living units, 256,000 square feet, 365 modules. It's a monster. It's the biggest project we've ever done, biggest modular project in Philadelphia. And as of the time that we did this, was the largest modular single building modular project on the East Coast. So it's a big one. We got a downtown corner site with some underground subway stations, just a ton of challenges there. So again, for us, from the planning side, it starts with the logistics themselves and confirming the delivery route, same methodologies. Because of the size of this project, there's obviously no on-site storage. So we really needed a sort of multiple staging areas, if you will, multiple storage yards to be able to do this. It started with this facility here. This is storage lot number 1. So we delivered directly from the factory to the first offsite storage area where we basically pre-staged modules. We did this months in advance so that we could build up enough of a capacity to be able to supply to the local storage area that could supply to the crane to be able to set the building in the pace that we needed to set it. Here's 2 examples of that delivery route itself. So again, you can see this one, all the other previous versions had minimal movements, tried to store things locally, tried to move the boxes as few as possible. Here, we just didn't have a choice, and we delivered them from the storage area to a local storage yard, and then from that local storage yard back to the job site. So lots of coordination. And then once we get back to the site, again, kind of the same idea. What are our issues, right? How do we identify what they are? How do we resolve them? How do we ensure that this thing is feasible and that we're going to have a successful project at the end of the day? Well, first obstacle here was image number 1 and 2 in the upper right-hand corner. We had an alleyway on the backside that was one way. It was extremely narrow. It had power lines on one side, a school on the other, pretty much a dead road. We didn't use that for anything. I think it ended up being job trailer storage and some material storage at the end of the day. Number 3, out front, busy street, super busy street. If anyone knows Philadelphia, the roadway to the east here to the right is Broadway, probably one of the busiest streets in the entire city. And then the one here on the south of this page running east-west is Spring Garden. So that intersection is extremely busy. And to boot that, image 3 shows we have virtually no storage area. So we have very limited laydown. So the plan is maybe we can find some space in the front here to stick some boxes where we can pick from. But other than that, you pretty much have no other options, right? You've got a alleyway on the back that's inaccessible. You got busy roads on the right, too busy a road in Broad Street on the left. And you've got to find a way to get something in the very front of that building if at all possible. And then the final obstacle on the site side of it was on image 4, the lower right-hand corner. was an underground subway station that is directly at the corner of the actual project site. And like I mentioned in slide 1, this one has 2 levels of underground parking, which means that parking garage is going down right next to this underground subway station.
Awesome. And then
So
getting into, oh yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a delay here. So the plan here is, okay, how do we do this? How do we successfully set this building? Well, the end result, and we looked at several, frankly, was 2 tower cranes with a kind of systematic phase here. And if you note the box, the teal box with the red outline in the lower bottom corner here, underneath number 3, that is that central pick spot that I showed you in the previous image where we said we likely have to stage boxes from. That's on that sidewalk right off of Spring Garden. This was the plan. And, there's lots of crane coordination here, lots of module coordination here, lots of team coordination here. And we had very little margin for error here, very little.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of questions about cost in this particular one. And so again, this was a building that was built several years ago. And so the cost of what that was at the time isn't really pertinent to what the cost is now with kind of inflation and like changing material prices and things like that. But Sam, can you speak a little bit to cost and kind of like, how VVC shows up in the market in regards to cost?
Yeah, I mean, and this one, to your point, this was actually built during COVID as well, which, costs across everything in COVID was unprecedented and unpredictable. So I probably wouldn't speak to cost, particularly on this exact job.
I remember watching lumber prices go up, like 1,000% up. At that
we
time,
were getting
that
quotes.
was like a weird time for all of us.
We were getting quotes that the vendors would say were good for 5 days instead of 60 days. So, and even shorter than that, frankly, at some point. But what I can say on cost with these, again, kind of the reason we're doing the feasibility studies that we're doing is to develop as accurate a cost as possible for the project based on all the circumstances and factors that we talk about here, right? The reason we do this analysis and we do it so thoroughly, so early, is to develop the most accurate costs as early as possible. If we don't do this, we don't know these things exist, or we're not planning for them appropriately, means we're probably not budgeting for them appropriately. So that's why this is such an important part of our process.
And it all happens up front.
Yep.
Okay, and then here's the actual, you can actually see the set underway on this project.
Yep. So think of that image we just saw, right? The teal modules in phase 1, the red box at the bottom of the site. For lack of a better term, it looks like the picture here, right? It's going according to plan. We're picking our boxes from our centralized pick location. Our weights and geometry all worked. Again, very little margin for error, and frankly, we were right to the maximum capacity here on some boxes. But all in all, it's going according to plan, and it's working.
And here's that project going up. And it's kind of cool story. If anyone is based in Philly, and I know at least one person in the webinar was, VVC has built 4 buildings, all of large magnitude, all on this street. So you are driving by and you see VVC building, VVC building, VVC building, all within about a half-mile drive on this street. So this developer did quite a few projects with VVC in this location. And one other question, Sam, and I'm gonna pipe in with this one just because I think this is something that's a curiosity. How do you get the crane out of that building when you're finished?
Great question. Great observation, by the way. So if you want to go back, well, it doesn't matter. You don't have to go back. So one crane builds another here. So you bring in a sort of conventional ground crane to build your tower, your first tower, and then you use your first tower to sort of erect your second tower. And then you deconstruct the first tower when you're done with it, pull it out in sections, basically reverse the way you installed it. And then you bring that ground crane back in once the building's in way. So you got to go up and over that building to deconstruct that tower to pull it back out. And then you fill the concrete open areas in afterwards. Yeah, great question.
And here is that building actually finished. So these are not renderings. These are real photographs. I have stood at the top of the top floor and on the roof of this building and it is pretty freaking cool to see how large it is. And this is actually the largest modular apartment building on the East Coast.
Yeah, I would add, like, to my team, sort of comment earlier, anybody involved in this project from whatever level, from the very beginning to the very end, and we're talking hundreds of people, should be proud of this project. It is a marvel of accomplishment for everyone involved.
And so we kind of gave away the answer here. Is modular feasible? Yes, this building has actually been built and completed. But I think that the key here is to show that this site still had a ton of complexity. It was not a slam dunk from kind of all of the pieces going through. But part of what made overcoming those obstacles make sense was the size and the repeatability of the project. So despite some of kind of the earlier obstacles that were uncovered from a pre-construction and planning perspective, the size of the project more than made up for those. Like the developer was able to tap into economies of scale that still made this project pencil for them. And Sam, do you know about how much time this developer saved on the construction by going modular versus traditional site built on this one?
Yeah, I've heard some of it feedback. I don't know if I have exact numbers, but I want to say it was almost in half or close to in half. And this is a large project. You're talking 2-3 year build here, I'm sure. So it was a significant time savings.
Yeah. So if you can get people indoors a full 12 months earlier than you would have elsewhere, even if the cost of construction is competitive to site built, that's where some of the competitive advantage comes in. Okay, so we're going to transition into the Q&A portion, but before we do, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have another webinar coming up in October. It's all about how to evaluate modular factories. We're hosting that with our partners over at ICG. They're a third-party organization that this is their bread and butter. They evaluate modular factories and they give recommendations on how factories can improve and work with different factories. So we announce all of our webinars both on LinkedIn and through our newsletter. So if you would like to be added to our newsletter so that you stay in the know and kind of what's going on, we put out case studies, we put out tools for analyzing and looking at modular projects. We have some pro forma tools we're going to send out to anyone who subscribes to the newsletter today. And so and then we also talk about kind of industry trends. We talk about new projects. There's video tours that we put out through that newsletter. So it's a really great resource for anyone that's excited and interested in modular. And we'd be happy if you just put the add me. We'll make sure to take everyone who's said add me, and we'll get you guys added to that newsletter. And then go ahead and keep your eyes open for that newsletter or that webinar in October, all around how you evaluate modular factories. So VBC recognizes that we exist in an ecosystem. There are lots of other modular factories that exist. Maybe VBC isn't the right fit for your project, but how do you go about actually evaluating the factory? And so we're going to bring some great experts into the webinar to walk us through that. So keep your eyes open for that. And then I want to thank Sam for all the amazing information that he's been able to give us so far. And we're going to move into the Q&A. So a lot of you shared questions ahead of time that I'm going to start to go through. And I'll also go through some of the questions that people were asking in real time and try to incorporate some of that as well. So if you guys have questions and you want to make sure we answer them, go ahead and put them in the messages right now. And then I'm going to start with some of the questions people already asked. So Sam, the first question we have is around how do, if you're going with a modular project, how are amenity spaces or lobbies handled? And how does that work with having kind of like some mix? Like, is it possible to have some site built mixed in with a modular build?
Yeah. Let me just confirm. Can you hear me okay? Is my internet connection okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I know it's a common thing we run into. I don't want to say every project, but probably 9 out of 10, frankly. Given what we do as largely multifamily, we end up in metro areas that require you to go vertical, which means some element of podium or underground parking or underground common space of some sort. So we look at each one of those on a case-by-case basis. Some of the challenges with those types of spaces trying to be modular are the requirements for big open spans or high ceiling heights in particular, thinking amenity spaces or central lobby type of areas. It's not that you can't build them in modules, but there's generally some compromises required to do so. We see a mix. Sometimes we do them if it makes sense. We do them. Sometimes we don't. I think the majority of them tend to go podium space because they don't have the flexibility within those spaces to sort of accommodate modular. But you can certainly evaluate them to see what makes the most sense on a case by case basis.
Another question is, who's responsible for the coordination of MEP from design?
Yeah. So this is one of the things unique to VBC, and I'll speak to it in that terms. I come from the background where we didn't have this service as part of our package. So at VBC, we have our own in-house stamping architect. We have our own sub-consultant base that we use for all MEPs. So part of the value with what we do is we eliminate that sort of traditional architectural MEP structural sort of design process and introduce our own unique modular team that are experts in modular to try to help push that efficiency and design it and optimize it for our solution. So ultimately, the answer is we do. There's a little descoping back and forth that we do, but it's a value-added service that we provide.
Yeah. Next question, I want to talk about water intrusion. Someone just asked, how is rainfall managed during set? I had a similar question
Good
earlier,
question.
which
Yeah.
was, what about, how would you handle something like mold? Or so let's
Sure.
talk about water intrusion.
Yeah, this is a great talking point. It's the number one enemy of any modular project. If you have any exposure to modular, larger multifamily type projects, especially with flat roofs, it's your number one concern. So again, I will compliment the team that we have here. We have an amazing group that do an outstanding job of managing water. You can't prevent it, obviously, and you can't predict it. I think in this business, you tend to become a weather expert, but as we know in the current world, weather is a bit unpredictable, so you end up managing it. And again, those guys do a great job with this. We have some very creative ways to mitigate that and to get the water off of roofs and to seal the buildings in a timely fashion. Lots and lots of ways around that. But those guys handle that, and they've been extremely successful doing it. So without getting into the details, great question. It has to be a priority, and you have to have people that know how to do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about at what point does a modular project make sense? And maybe we can talk about it specifically around VBC is like how many units
Sure.
are needed for modular to work, or like what size projects does VBC typically take on?
Yeah, that's a good one too. So I guess let me start just sort of a definition of what small, medium, and large maybe means to us. We define everything in square footage. So 75,000 square feet or less to us is small. Obviously, you can have 20,000 square foot projects, 50,000 square foot projects. But to us, that's kind of how we group them. 75 to 150 is medium, and then anything over 150 is large. So our focus is as the size of company that we are and the scale that we need to keep our facilities all running, back to that feasibility process and why we do what we do. The mediums and the larges are really the ones we're targeting and looking for. That said, in order to really manage your pipeline, you need some flexibility in it. So small projects do have a value in that to us as well. So it's not that we don't do them. We certainly do. We have several of them in the pipeline now. It's just our focus isn't necessarily on them. So when we get them in, we look at them, we assess them. That's part of that feasibility again. Small projects have a tendency, or let's say are more flexible. You can move them around in the pipeline a bit more. They happen faster because they're smaller, right? The larger ones, take a long time to develop. So you need some flexibility. So we certainly look at all projects to figure out what makes the most sense.
Great. Another question I think is a good one. When do code inspections occur, and how does that impact the modular process or kind of differ
Sure.
from the site built process?
Yeah. Yeah. And this might be one of the big differences, truthfully. I mean, there's a lot of them, I think. This is a good one. So if anyone's familiar with the process here, I'll talk to it high level. And there's certainly better people at this company to speak to this in great detail than me, but I will talk at a high level. So part of what we're required to do is get our plans submitted to a third-party agency that's ultimately the inspecting agency, approved by the state. We do that. We submit our plans. They get approved. Then we're beholden to build to those plans, right? During that process, there's an in-plant inspection procedure. There's a in-building QA program and an inspection process that we do. And then we also get audited, and there's an inspection process to the buildings that we build. So they come in, make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do, but also that we're building to the plans. That same set of documents goes to the building departments. And now the building departments now understand that it's a modular building and that their inspection scope is now reduced dramatically. And anything that's done in the field is inspected by them, and anything that's done in the factory is inspected by us. So it's a bit of an education process. I will say over the years, that's been one of maybe one of the challenges in the industry is getting awareness out there and how that process works and why, and who's responsible for what, and who has jurisdiction over what. But essentially, high level, that's kind of how it's handled.
Great. I saw another question about maximum widths of units, and this ties into this question around, do jurisdictions have oversized load transport logistics that need to be taken into account?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it's really why we're doing what we're doing. There are state requirements on state permitted roads for length, width, and height, but there can be within local jurisdictions even unique circumstances. There's also the fact that overpass that I showed in that one example, it might say it was 1410, but when you go out to measure it because of paving or road construction that happened over the last couple of years, that sign didn't get updated, is 14.8, right? So yes, every locale has some unique requirements. Every state certainly does. We take those all into consideration, and the reason we do that feasibility study early is to get that feedback back to the design team so that we know that we're designing something that we can ship and get to the site.
Great. If a project has prevailing wage requirements, do the modules meet those requirements?
So in the plant, they're not required to. East Coast here especially. Everything that's done in the field, if it's on site, if it's a prevailing wage job, falls under that jurisdiction for sure. But everything in the plant actually is not required to, which is inherently one of the benefits of doing this, right? It's that wage savings and that labor savings. If you're in a prevailing wage project or a union project where you have those wage requirements on site, those are the ideal targets for us. Again, part of this feasibility and geographic location is we know where those markets are, and that's the information we look to understand. Helps us understand the value.
Have you done any modules that attach to an external structure like a parking garage?
Sure. Yeah. The majority of our work is 4 or 5 stories over something. Podiums are very popular here, especially on the East Coast. Yeah, every one of those sits on a structure. It could be directly on steel. It could be directly on wood. It could be right on the concrete. It depends on the code and the use groups, of course. But yeah, every single one of those attaches to a podium or foundation system.
How long can modules sit outside before they've been installed, before they get installed on a client site?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of this kind of stuff, I think this, along with the water mitigation strategies and all those things, require a proactive approach, right? So you have to understand that if a module sits out in a storage yard for, say, 90 days or something, that you have to go out and inspect it. You have to manage it. You can't just ship them outside and forget about them. You can't just send them to a storage area and say it's not my problem kind of thing. That's all part of this process. Again, I'll tie back to the feasibility. It's why we look at the schedule and the size of the project to try to determine that, to try to minimize that. Part of the management of it is understanding and coordinating the site schedule. When is the podium ready for boxes? And comparing that to when we would have modules ready to ship. We always try to align those two critical path line items in the schedules to overlap as much as possible to avoid that situation as much as possible.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, next question. What phases of a project are not fixed costs that VBC would estimate as a per module cost? For example, what trades are needed outside of VBC's scope of work?
Well, I mean, I hear that as a 2-part question, but I'll think of it the second part. So in my opinion and experience in this business, scope of work, it's a great question for this actually. Scope of work is maybe one of, I'll just say it. To me, it's the most important element of this, but you have to define what you're doing in the factory, and more importantly, explain what you're not doing. And the scope of work is the document that bridges that. If anyone on this call has done a modular project, you know this is the challenge, right? You can look at the modular drawings. You can look at the conventional drawings. There is information missing from those two things. The scope of work is what we use to bridge that. We do a very detailed, I think it's, I don't know, 600 items, 20 pages long, color coded sort of scope. That's both narrative and visual to try to work through that. This is part of the burden, I think, and why this is part of what makes projects successful or not successful at the end of the day, is having enough good information, enough design of good information to be able to do that and develop a scope of work that ultimately leads to you manufacturing what you're supposed to, the GC or the client or the subcontractors understanding what they're supposed to do, and then executing on that. So scope of work, super important.
And we have general, so in certain areas, VBC can do full turnkey projects. For example, on the East Coast, we have general contractors that we work with in-house to do our own projects, but that doesn't exist everywhere. There are general contractors that we have worked with repeatedly that we have good relationships with. If there's a general contractor that's new to working with VBC on a project, we recommend that they come out and send their crew out to an active job site and we walk through things with them. Like we are happy to play nice with others and we want to encourage growth in the industry in general. So, we've got extremely experienced crews that can help other general contractors understand the scope of what the services are required. Okay. Another question, how do you handle the change in legislation between countries?
That's a tough one to answer sometimes. It starts with identifying it, what it is. I mean, we have the same issue sometimes with currency, with tax, sales tax, right? It is not easy. It's not easy to navigate. I'll be honest. I think we generally turn it over to our legal team to kind of work through and navigate through, because we on our side of it, front end of us are not experts at this. We need some support to do that because every country is different and every situation can be different. So to sort of answer it is we need our legal team to kind of review and dig into it. We work through it, identify what it is. But it is a challenging process. It can be.
And VBC has successfully completed projects in more than 12 countries. We have on the ground teams based in Europe for specifically, to be experts in their specific geographic locations. And so I think, that certainly helps as well.
Yeah.
So someone's asking, are we strictly offsite volumetric or is there some panelized manufacturing? We do full volumetric modules. So we are not doing any panelized construction.
Yep.
Someone wants to know, how is height safety managed on a site without a full scaffold?
Tie-off points. So your areas of exposure in this business are when you're on top of modules connecting and unconnecting. The way we work around that is we have OSHA approved connectors, if you will, that attach to the module that run a lifeline that our guys use, conventional harnesses with lanyards and retractables and tie off to that. So it's an OSHA approved system. We've not had an issue with it, thankfully. Fortunately, never had any sort of safety concerns as well. No major injuries. But it is a challenge. It can be a challenge. But we've developed systems and processes to kind of work around it.
Amazing. Okay, we've got. I'm going to try to squeeze one last question in. Does VBC handle the installation as well, or is there a third-party team to finish the box install in the field?
Yeah, so East Coast, we do all our own sets. Again, we have a really unique sort of opportunity here where we have a Philadelphia-based construction team where we do a lot of additional scope to Caitlin's point earlier. But that same team travels a bit and does all our installations on the East Coast. We're working on building a team in the West Coast, I believe, as well. And like I said, we're also working with some strategic partners out there to meet those needs. So yeah, we try to set all our own buildings if we can. We think that's a really important value-added service.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, everyone. Well, that brings us to the full hour. Like I said, look out for our other webinars. We're excited to have so many of you show interest in this. We are very available. So if you want to follow up with us after the webinar, we're happy. But everyone who said add me, we'll make sure to put you guys on the newsletter list. And hopefully we'll see you at another webinar soon. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure.